Today, I am very excited to bring on one of my favorite people to talk to in the space. He's known for a lot of things, but he's not known for being my co-host on the Roto Grinders Sunday morning DFS NFL GPP show. But Ben Gretch at Yards per Gretch, the thief of signals, the thief of bananas. He's all over the place. He's on ship chasing, he's on stealing bananas, and he's obviously writing one of the best newsletters in all of fantasy football, stealing signals. Ben Gretch at substack.com. I screwed that up. bengretch.substack.com. We'll get into it. Ben is here today. We're going to talk about fantasy football. I'm going to troll him again about Jarvis Landry for the fifth time this offseason that he's probably getting sick of. We're going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to get to know Ben a little bit better. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Best Ball Bros.
Give me your click, but you don't have to listen.
Oh, you had Gabriel Davis at 67%? Oh, sweetie, that's so hot.
Can I curse on the show?
Absolutely.
I was so fucking bad.
How can I lose? And the answer was by starting Allen Robinson over Jamar Chase.
Well, last year kind of attached myself to Trey Sermon, which hasn't worked out too well.
Bill, if you ever listen to this, I love you. He's just such a boomer now that it's painful.
I did think I was going to play in the NBA when I was like 6.
I'm going to tell Evan Silva their boy. Went to the bathroom and just told Evan, hey man, this is the top 15.
People love the life hacks, dude.
All right,
intro.
All right, Ben. The first thing I get excited when someone hasn't actually, this is weird. Someone hasn't watched a bunch of the episodes or whatever, because I started a thing where I'm asking a question to lead into it. And it is obviously, this is a fantasy sports show, typically a lot more fantasy football focused. What is the worst fantasy football take you have had in your career? What's the most memorable L you've ever taken?
I mean, I was really high on John Ross. I got a lot of shit for that for a few years.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I mean, that's a fairly easy and quick answer. I spent a lot of time arguing with people that the trend that just because he's fast doesn't mean that all overdrafted fast guys are, it doesn't mean he has to be part of that. He actually had really strong dominator rating and stuff when you control for the fact that he played some DB. It's really funny. I've gotten into college targets per out run this offseason, and I looked up John Ross's college targets per out run. It was elite. I still think John Ross should have been a star. I still
is he still in the NFL? He was last year, right?
He was with the Giants last year? Yeah, he played a little bit.
That's how you know it's over.
Somewhere.
That's how you know it's over. You're the fifth wide receiver or sixth wide receiver for the Giants. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ivan. Hello, Joe. Thank you guys for joining us, and Michael. I'm really excited to have Ben on for a couple of reasons. Actually, the first thing is a weird one that I wanted to lead in with. Obviously, Spike Week is very best ball focused within the fantasy lens, right? But it's kind of all fantasy sports. You being in the state of Washington can't play some of the best ball stuff that we do. How has that impacted with this crazy underdog explosion and everything? Obviously you're grinding this stuff harder or as hard as anyone that's out there. How has that kind of impacted your life as a fantasy football analyst?
It just makes me really angry all the time. I'm not happy about it. We were talking about moving this summer, and both of our families, mine and my wife's, are up here. We were talking about moving, and that was not a small part of it. I have been talking about moving since basically I got into the industry. There's little workarounds and things that are not always super above board, but the easiest thing is just finding ways to draft with buddies. I do a lot of drafting over at Ship Chasing with Pat and Pete. Draft with Sean over at Stealing Bananas a lot. Really enjoy that stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I would like to just be drafting on my own some too. That's the best way to.
How far are you from a state line to a legal state? Are you close?
3.5 hours. Yeah, the West Coast is a lot different than the East Coast.
Right.
It's a deep drive. And I mean, I don't know. I never set up. I should have set up a profile. Can you? I don't know. I guess someone else who lives in an abandoned state might be able to say. But can you even register? Because in some of the sites you can't even register, right? So I was in Hawaii recently. I was actually in Oregon recently, and I was like, I wish I could draft. What? Vancouver. Okay, fine. I could drive up to Canada. Yeah, for like whatever, 90 minutes to Canada.
Which has its other like
yeah, like I can cross into a different country like once a week, so I can go draft, and it's still 90 minutes or more. I mean, it's not like it's a super short drive. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was in Hawaii. I was in Oregon. I wanted to be drafting, but there's some pros to it too. Like I talked to like everybody's like, all you guys are drafting constantly, try to get your numbers in and stuff. So like when I go on a vacation to Hawaii, I don't feel much pressure. I'm just like, fine. I'm gonna enjoy my vacation. And so I've leaned into that side of it. I got 2 daughters. I kind of take it as like, I'm taking that time to try to be a good dad as much as I can, but it would probably be stripping even more of my time away from my family. So I try to see the positive, but honestly, dude, it's super frustrating. It's super frustrating that I can't just like hop in a draft sometimes. I mean, there's so many elements to it too that I like as somebody who doesn't have them, like I'll just lay them out. Like, I think it's super easy content on like Twitter and stuff to just show your drafts and be like, here's who I'm picking, like it's
please don't spoil my Twitter strategy.
Like it's just super, super easy.
It's like, I got the 101. Look at this team. It looks awesome. Yeah, no shit. It has Jonathan Taylor. And people are like, oh, cool team, bro. Like,
yeah, it's super good for your actual takes, for your actual like thinking through this guy versus that guy, where there's pockets of value, all that stuff. Just be testing your stuff, taking do tests actual tests here. Silva has talked about that for years with his 150 when he brings it out. He's like, I want to battle test this, I want to do this in enough drafts. I haven't released rings over stealing signals yet, in part because I feel like I'm way behind a lot of my readers in terms of how much I've drafted, and I don't want to be putting stuff out there where I'm leaning a certain way on guys that I don't want my followers to be leaning, because I don't understand the draft rooms as well as I should. So I want to be battle testing that stuff more than I am right now. I mean, so both of those. And then there's the element of just like wanting to get money down on your takes when you're researching as much as I am. Yeah. Obviously, it's like low probability stuff with these massive best ball tournaments. You and Pete had that awesome team last year that finished really high. But I mean, even that has like ancillary benefits for like your career and stuff too, where it's like, hey, look, I finished top 10. Like just having those bullets over the last few years would have been nice. I did really well in some other contests. I was leading the Scott Fish Bowl for like half the regular season.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I've only been able to draft a couple teams in these big tournaments. I finished top 20 in the FFPC Maine 2 years ago. I feel like there's a decent chance, a small chance, but maybe a better chance than average, that some of these best ball teams I could have built could have done well, and it would have been nice for my profile and things. So there's all these things where it's like, believe me, I think about this shit a lot. I'm like, this fucking sucks that I can't draft.
Is DraftKings best ball there, or is it? I actually don't know though.
They don't have DraftKings either.
None. I assume it's a statewide legal. Best ball is the thing.
Washington
that is
has
the issue.
Very bad gambling laws. Maybe the worst of the 50 states.
Yeah. It is funny because, like you said, you mentioned like I'm in the Midwest and I'm in Illinois, so it's not an issue. Gambling is everything is legal here. It's Illinois. Everything is legal here. Best ball, gambling, whatever, DFS. But in Missouri, it is not. And I'm actually by St. Louis. So like I always tell everyone I technically live in Illinois, but I say I'm from St. Louis because I can like throw a rock, and throw it into Missouri from my house. But if like someone from Missouri like drove across, to my house, they could draft. But it's very easy, right? For you and a lot of people in the Northwest, it is it's extremely different than where I live, or than, like you said, the East Coast is definitely a lot easier.
East Coast is way different. You can drive, the amount of time it takes me to drive to Oregon, you can drive across like 3 states. I mean, we went on a road trip.
Take the train. I know some people literally that when the New York and New Jersey sports betting thing was going on, they lived in New York City and they would just take the train over to Jersey and like whatever you get. Once you cross into Jersey, I make my bets. I sit on the train, I turn around, and I go back home, and it was just part of their day.
People talk about that with Vegas all the time too when they're visiting to drive into LA or drive into, I mean, not into LA, into California, SoCal, or into Arizona. You can go either way from Vegas. You got a couple options. I mean, Seattle's just kind of tucked up here. John makes a good point. I guess I could drive to Canada, but I haven't been to Canada in like 10 years. Why would I go to Canada?
You're right. Nobody wants to go to Vancouver, bro. No offense. No offense. I mean, nobody wants to come to St. Louis either, but nobody wants to go to Vancouver either. So let's talk a little bit about this like kind of specific fantasy football environment that we're in. Obviously, we're recording this in July of 2022, and this landscape has like changed from definitely when the both of us got into this whole space. Like I listened to every episode of Stealing Bananas, and it's like, some of the things you guys will talk about, I can almost sense it in you and Sean being like, yeah, like 5 years ago, this guy would have went in this round. And now he's going in this one. And like, am I like, how do I adjust my process? Am I wrong for my assessment? Is the market getting smarter or is the market getting dumber? It was like, you talked through, I think it was today that it got posted, like some dead zone-esque running backs. And it was like, well, here's my take on this guy, but then here's my take on this guy. And the market is treating them the same. Am I right? Is the market right? And like, that's kind of how I feel too about like everything. It's like the Gabriel Davis thing is like a meme now or whatever, but like we have to pay for certain guys that we didn't. Gabriel Davis would have been a freaking 8th round pick 5 years ago or whatever. And just the easiest win in fantasy. Now you want that guy, you got to pay for him. And there's all these nuances now to this game that we play that are so different. And have you like, how are you kind of thinking, like feeling, like you said, you haven't drafted a ton, but you're still doing lots of research and stuff. Yeah. This year, I feel like is the biggest difference I've ever felt in this entire space.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say I kind of, just to finish up the last conversation, I almost wear it as a badge of honor because it's like I don't even get to draft as much as I want to or do this stuff, and I'm that obsessed with this. Like I do pay a lot of attention to it. I would say that like over the long term, we've seen drafts, ADP, drafters, the market get sharper, right? But I also think in small samples, there's a lot of overreactions and there's a lot of shifts so it's like things are moving like a lot of things are moving, the right direction long term, but they are, it's vacillating as it gets there. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be aware. And I think one of the things that Sean and I really vibe on and really enjoy from our conversations is we've both just been obsessed about this since we were like young, like we've both been playing this for 20 years. I started my own league when I was a 12-year-old. Like I started playing this really, and I was like a freaking huge stats nerd already. Like I was the guy who was running it for my older brothers. I was the one that kept all the information and everything. I was that kid. And so through my formative years, through freaking puberty, through high school, I was already reading fantasy stuff constantly. Like the early days, reading Matthew Berry, reading all these guys in the 2000, 2001, 2002, and thinking of strategies and trying to game this stuff out. And there's I don't know, like one of the things that Sean and I will like kind of vibe on when we talk about that stuff and we have that sort of long-term thing is like there's always these trends in the industry. There's always, the popular new idea, like right now, correlation, week 17 correlation or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
You and I have talked before about how it's a really useful exercise to try to think about what the next trend might be. Basically, what's going to happen next offseason? What are we going to see in the data that makes us think something different next year? Because one of the things, having done this for a really long time, is you're like, there's a lot of shifts. And I think the shifts are typically positive, but it's okay to have a healthy amount of skepticism, I think, as well. And one of the biggest things I'll say is like, it's okay to be creative. Like, it's okay to think, something no one else does. It's hard to identify groupthink in the moment. Like right at this time of year, there's a lot of stuff that we all agree on. And I don't even know that there's anything that I want to specifically say is wrong. but you can definitely look back and say there was a lot of stuff we agreed on maybe last year or the year before that you can look back on and be like, that was pretty stupid that we all agreed on that. Like,
Yeah.
we're kind of fucking idiots, especially when you think about player takes, like some of the assumptions that the market was making was sure of. Oh, you had to take that guy over that guy because of these elements in his profile. So I think like being willing to be creative, willing to think outside the box, and just understand that there's probably less known than it feels like, even though things are getting sharper. It can always feel like everything is known, but I mean, the end result is like there's a lot of variability in this stuff.
100%. That was absolute gold. And you kind of touched on a couple of different things that really rung true with me. And the first one is, like you talked about, when you were young, like that, like I haven't worked in this space forever. I know you haven't literally, it hasn't been your entire career in fantasy football. That's not how it works.
2015 is when I started writing. So
you don't graduate college and just like become a fantasy football tout. It usually doesn't work like that. There's not a degree that says fantasy football tout. So it takes a little while to get there. But the same as you, I was accidentally clicked Gabe's comment again. Same as you, I was the kid. It's so funny you mentioned this right when you said you were like the guy running the stats and doing all that when you were young. My wife and I are trying to go to a bunch of St. Louis Cardinals games. They have a standing room only pass, so we pay $30 a month and we can go to every single game. We obviously don't have a seat. It's a standing room only ticket that we can get in, but I can go to, if I wanted to go, if they have 20 home games, I could go to all 20 for $30 total. And we bought that, and we're like, we're getting a little bit older. It's like, if we want to go, like, we just want a night out, let's just go to the Cardinals game. We can go to St. Louis, we can go out to dinner and then go to the game or whatever. But we went, and there's last week we went, and there's like some old ladies keeping score, right? The old, right? Yeah. Everybody that's probably watching this is probably close enough to our age. They understand. Bullock is not. I saw Bullock in the chat. He has no idea what keeping score at a baseball game is. But, so you literally are keeping, you pay the St. Louis Cardinals to keep score of the game. They're doing it on the big screen for you. But like, I don't, for whatever reason, that was a thing. And like, if we went to a game when I was growing up and I didn't get to do that, it was like my experience was ruined. I'm like, I'm fucking keeping score. I'm 8 or whatever. I'm keeping score of this baseball game, And so it was like, that's always been the thing. My longest running home, we have a dynasty league that we drafted when I was in early high school, with a lot of my high school buddies. Some people have moved on or whatever, but I'm trying to remember who I'm 34, so it's been 18 years or whatever since we drafted the initial launch of this. It was like Mike Vick, like I don't know, it was like we were drafting at that point in time, and I was so obsessed with all of this back then. So it's absolutely the same thing for me. And then we were literally talking in the Spike Week Discord today about some of the like lessons, and you look back like last year, like you said, we think we got so smart last year. And I'm like, I did so much dumb shit. Like there's so many things I did wrong. Player take, or we were talking a lot about the archetype type stuff. It was like, oh, there's this idea that when I draft 0 RB, I got to mix in James White because, I need those early season points. And it's like, I don't agree with that anymore. And like, and I'm not.
Well, you didn't agree with that last year.
Yeah,
you very famously asked Davis what the fuck James White was doing for that bill.
But I was actually drafting James White last year. It was just that.
Oh, that was a hyper fragile build. You were like, why are you adding James White to that? Was that right?
Yeah, Josh Jacobs was his like RB4, and he still took James White. Or whatever. But your point is so spot on that like. We're definitely getting smarter 100%. But at the end of the day, also, we really don't know shit. We really don't know shit. And everything that wins, I was talking about this today too. Everything that wins is like something that was uncertain, or like a contingency, which is basically uncertainty, the same thing, right? Why was Rashad Penny the winner? not because we came into the year like Rashad Penny's the best running back pick in drafts. It was like Rashad Penny's pretty good. He has contingent upside and maybe a little bit of uncertainty. And then it just so happened to play out in the fantasy playoffs where his opportunity came to shine. And guess what? The good player just absolutely crushed. Amon-Ra, right? Go whatever. None of these guys, we didn't come into the year like, oh my God, yeah, you have to take Amon-Ra St. Brown. But so we're getting smarter, but the whole game is like not about being the smartest right now in July.
But absolutely. John has this all caps message. He's been tweeting this all off season that nothing matters. And like essentially like no player takes matter, all that stuff. I do think John takes it a little bit to the extreme.
Too far. I would take it too far, but I agree. Yeah.
So I wrote about this in my recent Substack post that when I first started doing fantasy writing, I started getting really into the takes that I had the first few years. I mean, I remember, I think it was like, especially, it was funny, especially if like if a take did well, like if people loved it. Like I remember writing up Devontae Parker in year 2 or year 3, and I was like, he's a rocket ship or something, and people loved this wrote of his article. It got shared a ton. People were all on it, and I was like, freaking love Devontae Parker. I remember I started reaching for him in drafts. I reached for him in the Scott Fish Bowl that year. He did not have a good year. So you sort of like lock yourself into these takes because you start to get a lot more certain on player takes. Or this happened to me early in my career, and I wrote about this recently that I still did pretty well overall, but I felt like I was doing worse I started writing in 2015, 2016 than I had been in my leagues. I was playing in, mid-stakes leagues and where I can get my money, whoever would take my dirty Washington money. There's a few sites that I can find out there from when I was in high school. I've been playing in these types of, offshore fantasy sites and stuff, but 2012, 2013, 2014, doing really well. 2015, 2016, I started doing a little worse. And I actually had like a hard time with that because my writing was doing really well. And I was getting a lot of really positive feedback about my analysis, right? And that was exciting. And I was starting to make a name for myself in the industry. But I was finding myself not succeeding as much on my own teams. And I personally at the time was like, well, it's because I'm spending so much time in my analysis, I'm not paying attention to my teams. I used to, pour over waivers and look for trade opportunities, and that's why. But I also think a big part of it was, and I wrote this recently, was I had been previously more comfortable with uncertainty, just like kind of like these are the things I don't know. How do I find ways around it? Which is sort of like what John's saying. I think he's doing a very good job of that. And then I started to get way too certain on player takes, which put my sort of the balance of what I was using to make my decisions towards the wrong thing. Like I'm very certain that this guy's a good pick no matter what, and not thinking about the market, not thinking about more things. To the extent now that I've gotten better later in my career, and some people say that I have, useful things to say or whatever. I think all of that, like I don't think I have anything particularly interesting other than I think I've gotten a lot more comfortable with uncertainty. And people who read my Substack will know that I am often writing about ranges and what ifs, and if I have an edge, like I believe that it's got to be related to this idea that I've gotten more now actively comfortable with uncertainty, in addition to doing the research that I was doing and having a lot of player takes and having stuff that I like, but also being like, look, this is all contingent on price, this is all contingent on the specific build that I have, all of those things. And so everything you were just saying about that, I mean, again, I guess this is the pushback I would have on what John says. There's a ton of uncertainty, but I actually don't think nothing matters. I think you have to be able to identify when you look at a situation, what is the whole range? Like what is Amon-Ra St. Brown's a great example. I wasn't on him, but he's absolutely a guy I would have told you last year had the potential to be really good. He had an interesting prospect profile as a later draft pick. He had some production in college. I think he was in early declare. I'm pretty sure he was in early declare. Yeah. He was a guy that in dynasty circles, we were like, this guy's pretty interesting as a later round guy. I had reasons to not necessarily like him, but there are elements to his profile that told us this guy could actually be pretty good. And so there was an uncertainty measure with him and then rookies in general, we know are uncertain. We know they have the potential for late season breakouts. This all fits with stuff that I write about a lot. If you're reading my Substack, that was not surprising
as well as the situation for him, right? His theoretical target competition, which did not end up being his target competition,
Right.
is Brashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams and Khalif Raymond and what he had. There were no obstacles to him. It was just all the, we looked at the Lions as a thing that we didn't really like. We looked at him as a meh, like rookie or whatever, right? And so all that compounded into whatever. He's a 15th round pick that we don't care about.
I was very high on Swift. I was very high on Hawkinson, and because I was high on both of them, I thought maybe this is not the right situation, which is not typically the right way to think through things, obviously. John, again, I keep shouting out John, but he says we should name it Hyperfragile GTO. So some things matter. To the extent that some things matter, I think probably what matters the most is upside, is ceiling, is difference makers, especially, I mean, it's a little different in best ball, and this is obviously a best ball show. I understand why people sometimes take some floor picks in best ball because you kind of have to construction-wise. But especially like in redraft and in manage, which is more my biggest forte.
Yeah.
You are going to change your roster from the start to the finish. It almost doesn't matter like how balanced your roster is at the draft. You could literally do a 0 RB draft in July and then, try to just win it off waivers. I'm not suggesting that, but you could. And I think you could actually succeed fairly easily if you dominate enough at the other positions. What you're trying to do is basically get 7 or 8 guys out of your draft that are going to be hits. That are going to be difference-making hits, right? Or maybe 5 to 6.
Yeah, difference-making hits.
Difference-making hits. Maybe there's 2 or 3 that are huge. 5 to 6 or 7 to 8 that are like reliably good. You're going to have misses. You got to just like wear that. And I think that's true in best ball too. I mean, that's part of why I've never like been fully on the like optimized for 2 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends in every situation, which was a big, big thing last year. I know a lot of you guys have come back off that a little bit. In certain builds, you're willing to take the third QB, more willing to take the third tight end. I think last year you were leading the charge of like you had to do 2 and 2 on almost every draft. Right?
I was a very big proponent of that. I still am pretty into that, but I am, as you said, I think any sort of rigidity, is rigidity a word? Being rigid, rigidity is like evil. Like really, like that's the problem is not even necessarily the idea. Like, and I wasn't saying that you were saying this of 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends or whatever. It is not being like, at the end of the day, I want to draft a good team, right? If I draft Hunter Henry and Noah Fant and I get to the 18th round and there's a player there that makes more sense for me to draft a 3rd tight end, I should draft the 3rd tight end. But also there might be a draft where that doesn't exist. And I should just be like, okay, I'm willing to be pretty fragile here. It's
basically like what does that individual pick actually impact? Like, what does it bring to your roster? Right. And sometimes, I mean, one of the things I've been saying lately, as it's come up a few different times, and I think I said it on Stealing Bananas, is like the biggest mistake you can make a fantasy drafter is trying to fix a problem like at a spot in the draft where it's not allowing you to. Like,
yeah, that was
the
a
best
great
example is like the dead
beautiful
zone
comment.
Yeah, like if you've started 0 RB, the biggest issue with people who don't like 0 RB is they pull out of it too early. They start taking dead zone backs. Those are just wasted picks. You absolutely have to keep taking receivers and press the advantage that you started with, and then you have to manage the late round running back situation. But you can't start 0 RB through 5 rounds and start hammering, or 4 rounds and start hammering running backs in rounds 5, 6, and 7, and then be like, oh, 0 RB suck. Like that's you tried to like fix running back by not like you should have. I would way rather you took an anchor running back or 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds and then started hammering receiver than tried to do 0 RB and pulled out in the 5th round and started drafting running backs in the worst spot to take running backs. I mean, historically, this is where running backs are the worst pick. So that, I mean, I had a friend in a dynasty league who was asking about, he needed QBs in a super flex league and should he take some 2nd round shots on some of these QBs? I'm like, the wide receivers you can get here, the David Bell or the Wan'Dale Robinson, those guys are better picks than taking the stab on like Desmond Ridder, whose profile is not great right now. I mean, Desmond Ridder might be fine, but my main point was you can't fix your quarterback issue in your super flex dynasty league just because you want to with this quarterback class. This is one of the worst draft capital quarterback classes ever. They might hit. Well, probably 1 or more of those quarterbacks is going to be okay, but
it's Sam Howell. But it's Sam Howell. It's not any of these other guys.
I hope it's Sam Howell. I got a lot of him. But point is, he was trying to fix the quarterback problem where it wasn't. The draft. When I said this to Corain the other day, he goes, "The draft doesn't care about your needs," and I was like, "That's a perfect way of putting it." Like, so you you got to take what you're given. So like you just said with the 3 tight end thing, if you can get a third tight end that actually adds some firepower to your build, fine. You know what I mean? Like, or you have a reason to believe it, or he's fallen or whatever. And if you don't, then don't, you know, like there's no, the rigidity thing is a huge thing. You still have to understand structure, but that's what the creativity I was talking about earlier. Like you got to be a little bit creative.
Yeah. That's everybody. My general premise of the entire fantasy football landscape, and this comes into play on just about every subject. The structure thing is probably the easiest one, where they say, just fucking tell me how many quarterbacks to draft. Tell me how many running backs to draft, right? Or tell me when to draft the running backs, right? That's
and who to draft. People just want you to draft their team for them.
Right? Exactly. But even if they don't, I want to like give me a guideline. Give me this rubric that says here's how to construct this team. I know that I want a coloring book. I don't want a canvas. Don't give me a fucking canvas because I'm going to just throw shit on the wall. I want a coloring book, and I'm going to color in between those lines.
Yeah.
That's what everybody wants in fantasy football. And it's like, the problem is if I give you lines to paint in between, it doesn't work. Like, it just doesn't work for every scenario. And the creativity is the perfect example for this kind of ridiculous metaphor. Is like, you need the creativity to go outside the lines and paint on the canvas. You can't be stuck to this outline on this coloring book, because certain times, actually almost every draft, you have to think different and be like, actually, I know I need a running back here, but these are still not good picks. I understand that my team needs a running back, but we can still figure out how to make a better team by not drafting a running back here, right? I watched it's stuck in my head now because I watched the Swolecast earlier today, and shout out to Dave Kitchen. I'm actually rocking the Fantasy Insider shirt today for this. Shout out to Dave. But like, he took Eli Mitchell. He actually started with the 0 RB team. And like, I don't hate Eli Mitchell. It's not a slide on Eli Mitchell, but it was just kind of one of those where this was the first best ball team he's drafted of the entire summer. And he went 4 wide receivers and a tight end and was like, oh shit, I guess I need a running back. And he took Eli Mitchell. And I'm not saying that Eli Mitchell's the wrong pick, but I'm saying the reasons for taking those guys are wrong. And I just think we're in this space now where these are the conversations we should be having, where it's like exactly what you said and what Pat said. The draft doesn't give a shit about what you need. You need a running back. They're going to give you the shittiest running backs. That's actually probably what's going to happen. You need one. We're going to give you the shit ones and then hope that you take them, because now you're going to give us an advantage. You know what I mean? And that's the fun of all this for me, is that all that nuance.
So this comment, live a little, I wonder what that's in reference to, but if it's saying that taking the running back is live a little, I would argue you're taking the running back because you're afraid of the fact that you don't have a running back yet. And that's sort of the, fear-based decision. You want to live a little, don't draft the running back. Like when I think of live a little, I think of like go cliff diving or something. Like that's what I did on my 35th birthday in Hawaii, like a couple weeks ago. Like, I want to, we'll live a little, draft a running back. I don't know if that's necessarily what Corbin's saying, but like I hear that type of feedback sometimes, like, oh, just take the risk on the running back. I mean, I think it's like a lot tougher, frankly. And the reason that people have such a hard time with 0 RB, it's a lot tougher to keep saying, hey, I have 4 receivers right now, and I'm going to continue to draft receivers, even though I don't have a running back. And we know that like the elite play, we're not blind to the fact that like Todd Gurley was a must-have the year that he was elite. Then Christian McCaffrey was a must-have. Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson were 10.5K guys in DFS every week that year, and everyone was trying to jam them both in and then playing $3,000 players around them because they were so good. They had like 25-point floors. Like, elite running backs are absolutely elite. No one's denying that. But like, I want to be like willing to take risks, frankly, be uncomfortable in certain situations. I also want to get exposure to running backs in the early rounds of drafts for all the reasons I just said. But Corbin said you got it better than I did. So sorry about that, Corbin. I kind of jumped probably the wrong way on your comment. But I have seen the way that I read your comment. I have seen that type of comment before. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think the best advice that I've heard in the last several years, and I've repeated it, I think Pete is the one that I would maybe attribute it to, or that I've heard discuss it most consistently and eloquently. And it is more of a broad stroke thing. But like, you want to understand these structural things. You want to understand the dead zone. You want to understand the theories and reasons behind going 2 quarterback or 2 tight end, and how that can open up the depth at wide receiver and running back in your builds. But the biggest like broad stroke thing, as you understand those elements, is whatever capital you use earlier in your draft, don't use a lot of it late. And if you if you go receiver heavy early, take extra running backs late. If you build hyper fragile, you take a lot of running backs early, then take, more receivers late. Don't take a ton of running backs late. Just this idea that wherever you're investing a lot of capital in the early part of drafts, if you take an elite tight end early, you might not need a 3 tight end build. You're kind of, committing to that tight end.
Yeah.
If you take an early QB, or you take 2 in the QB window, you're definitely not taking a third, right? Like if you take 2 in the top 10 or 15, you're definitely not taking a third quarterback. It's a pretty logical, simple guideline to think by. If you need a tiebreaker, do I need this extra running back or receiver? Where did I spend more capital early in my draft? And I mean, honestly, that's one of the better pieces of fantasy advice I've heard in in years, because it is less rigid. There's room for interpretation. Okay, yeah, I did take more capital early, but I took some kind of questionable bets and they fit my team this way. And so, maybe I'm going to draw a little bit outside the lines in this way on this one, but it's not trying to say you have to do this or you have to hit this number of running backs when you hit this number by this many. I have a hard time with that stuff.
Yeah. It's funny because when you mentioned that, it made me think of that. So this was probably the best fantasy football advice I've ever given, and I feel like it ended up getting ruined. And I've given a lot of bad advice, so the bar is really low. When you attach your brand to Trey Lance and Darrington Evans for an entire offseason and Antonio Gibson at the fucking 1-2 turn, it's probably not the bar is really, really low for what is actually good advice that you gave. But I went on Leone's, when this best ball thing started to blow up, I went on Leone's pod last year and we talked through a lot of this strategy stuff. And it's funny because this has become a thing that people say. And there was no plan for this. I didn't scheme this out, but I was just like, everybody drafts like they're fucking wrong. I'm like, why are we not drafting like we're right? Which is literally everything that you just said. You literally defined it perfectly.
Although people have taken that too far too.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
People have ruined that. People have absolutely. So I literally was like, I didn't think that was a big thing. I just thought that was just kind of like a way to define something
and to move people a certain direction, and then they go too far. It's the vacillations, right?
Yes.
And it's
100%.
You still have to understand that sometimes you have to have contingency-based decisions. Sometimes you have to be a little bit if then, not everybody's going to hit their ceiling. Your whole roster can't be perfect. It just doesn't happen in fantasy football. That's the other element where I'm I hate to be I've been doing this for 20 years, but that's the other thing. When you've played a lot of years of this, you're not going to hit the nuts that perfectly. But in a huge tournament, you have to think that you're going to get close. I totally understand the draft you're right,
but not perfect. Right? It's not close, but not perfect.
Yeah. None of these teams that win these tournaments are perfect, right?
Liam drafted Justin fucking Fields, dude. Liam drafted a 2 QB team with a useless quarterback too. Absolutely useless.
Right.
He had multiple useless picks. He drafted 75% Gabe Davis, who was borderline useless. You're going to have misses. The whole point about draft as if you're right is on that team, I'm right about something, not everything.
Right.
I'm right about, and that's exactly what you outlined perfectly.
And that helps you. And I've heard you've written about this as well, and I really like the piece. But you were draft about as if you're right about something is such a great way of putting it, because then you're okay, I'm going to decide that I'm right about my running backs on this team, and then I'm not going to have to worry about my running backs. And then if I'm wrong about that one thing, then I'm wrong about that one. It's sort of like DFS. You're trying to limit the number of things you have to get right. But you're picking one thing. You're not saying I'm going to be right about everything. My early receivers, my early tight ends, QBs, running backs are all going to be perfect, because it will not happen.
Right.
And
It's like
Corbin, I gotta give one more note to Corbin. He said that those are the words from Kitchen through that draft, and I picked that up from Bullock as well. I did not realize. So Kitchen said live a little the way that I was interpreting.
I turned off the stream because he couldn't figure out how to use the spike week
it's
tools.
so much better than I thought I was giving Corbin shit, but I was giving Kitchen's argument shit.
I can't remember what the Kitchen thing was. I tuned in for most of the episode and turned it out because Kitchen couldn't figure out how to like pull up the spike week rankings because he's a boomer. It was literally his first draft. He messaged me like a half hour before the Swolecast went live. He was like, "Hey, can you give me access to the spike week stuff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll do it." Whatever. And he couldn't figure it out. And so they're like, "What rankings do you have in here?" And he's like, "Well, they're ETR, but I adjusted them." They're like, "You work for a company that has a best ball product and you don't." And he's like, "Well, I couldn't figure it out." So anyway, that was funny. But that's like my favorite thing. This whole kind of like, not necessarily just like draft as if you're right, but like we're in this weird spot, right? Where people are starting to, as you said, the oscillations and people are definitely getting smarter. But like sometimes we're misapplying things, or we're all living in this bubble, right? I mean, you and I both live in this bubble. You do ship chasing shows and you talk with Sean, you talk with smart people. I talk with smart people. And it's like, it's easy to get caught up with those people and be like, this is the consensus.
Yeah.
Right. When the reality is just like, how about we just like do the right thing and realize that like the bubble that we're in is all doing the right thing and we're taking the money from everybody else.
Right. That's a hard one for sure. Cause that happens. The more you hear, it's just a natural psychological thing. The more you hear it and the people you're talking to, you definitely think that it's more known than it is. I get caught on that a lot. I was going to say something about this Kitchen thing again. I can't remember what it was. Or maybe it was something else you said, but no, I have definitely felt what you were just describing for sure.
Okay. We're about 42 minutes in. We talked a lot about best ball. I hope you guys have enjoyed the best ball conversation. I'm forcing the conversation now away. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna lead off into the segue into Ben's non-fantasy football life. Start, bench, cut. Jake Locker. Is it Jake Browning? And let's go. I'm trying to think of another Washington quarterback off the top of my head. What is it? Marcus Tuiasosopo? Is that
yeah.
Okay. Is that let's go with those two. Because Browning won. Locker was obviously the high draft pick, and Tuiasosopo was closer to our time frame.
Yes. Tuiasosopo I saw in the 2001 Rose
Keith
Bowl.
Price. John says Keith Price. I'll throw start, bench, cut, and whatever a fourth thing would be. Keith Price, if you want to throw Keith Price in there.
I'm gonna ignore Keith Price because
okay.
I think I drank through those years. Tuiasosopo was a guy that I saw in sort of like my formative years as well, and I remember going to games with my brother, and we had a little song. We were like, Tuiasosopo, Tuiasosopo. Because so Brock Heward was our quarterback and he got hurt, and Tuiasosopo came in a game, and that's when we developed this song. The game that Tui came in, he played incredible, and then he went on to lead us to the Rose Bowl the next year. He was the first college quarterback to ever throw for 300 yards and rush for 200 in a game against Stanford that season. Dude was ran sort of the option offense, very physical, but a good passer as well. Easy start for me on any of those four. Easy. I
love it. I love
He's
it.
One of my all-time favorites. Marcus Tuiasosopo. So that was more the heyday of Washington football. I guess I'm gonna cut both. Well, I don't know what is it? Keep, trade, cut?
Start, bench, cut. So one of them gets benched, the other one gets cut. Locker and
so Browning took us to the college football playoff.
That's why I put him in. I
hated Jake Browning.
Oh,
I hated him. I was not a fan. He got worse every year. he had this nasty habit of taking his head, like he was kind of skittish in the pocket, taking his eyes down from downfield. And then even when the pressure wasn't there, couldn't get them back up and get the ball down the field. We turned into a pretty run-heavy offense with a good defense, which was part of the reason that we made the college football playoff. That was the heyday of like Washington's become known as like DBU. Like our secondary was really, really good. We like completely shut down some decent Mike Leach, Washington State passing offenses those years. Our D was really, really good. I saw Locker versus Nebraska in Nebraska back in the day. That was a great atmosphere. Flew out to Nebraska for a non-conference game. Probably also saw him versus Nebraska in Washington. Locker was fun, but Locker was always overhyped. He had a cannon arm. I'm going to put Locker on my bench. He was fun. He was a gamer, would run. The people loved how good his arm was. That guy missed more open deep runners on deep shots by 10 yards than anyone you've ever seen. Like when he got drafted in the top 10, I was like, you guys are fucking in for it. And he ended up retiring. But I mean, accuracy to me is a huge, huge element in terms of projecting college quarterbacks forward. And even in college, when clean pockets, dude could not hit like wide open runners, like down the middle of the field. He's out overthrowing them. It's like, you just gave up a 70-yard touchdown, underthrow him by 10 yards, take the 50-yard gain, let the DB catch up. Do not overthrow him. And he would miss on some stuff like that. But I always liked Locker a lot. I'll take him as my bench guy. I'm going to cut Browning, even though he took us to the college football playoff. I think he held us back, frankly. I think he was good, but never really developed, never got better. And Washington could have been better in that era if he could have played a little bit better quarterback. And Keith Price was just sort of like a 2-year starter that wasn't
He followed up the Locker era, right? Was what he did.
Yeah, he was the bridge. Maybe he was only a 1-year starter, bridge between Locker and Browning, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Looks like he started 2.5 years, 3 years,
2 years. Okay, 3 years.
Something like that. So then the follow up question. That's literally my college. And I wasn't just like trying to remember the players. I was actually playing. And
so this is just after I was out of college.
Keith Price, 2010
I was still
to 2013. Yeah, exactly.
I don't remember these teams.
So then if you had to put not a start bench cut, but if you had to put a top 3 of your
this
favorite...
is the Sarkisian era. Yeah, I definitely.
Sark.
Definitely.
Keith Price was Sark, yeah.
It blocked that whole era out of my head. Sark was it.
So did Sark. Did Sark.
Sark was at a bar right after he got hired. We were stoked, and we went.
Sark was at a bar? No fucking way.
Surprise. We went in to the Ram in New Village for anyone who knows Seattle, and went back to the bar, and we saw Sark and one of his assistants sitting at the bar, and we're like back in the bar. There's booths in the back, and then there's the actual circular bar here. We're sitting in one of the booths, and we're like, "That's awesome, dude! Like that's Steve Sarkisian. He just got hired. This is so cool." Me and my buddy were talking about it. Like, okay, we're gonna send him a drink. So we send him a drink, gets it delivered, turns it down, starts looking around. They get up and leave. Like, no kidding. Like 30 seconds later, we're like, okay, hey, welcome to UW. Like, we're just. We told him to tell him from Husky Nation or something. Like, hey, welcome to Washington. I think we're the only ones who recognizes who the guy was because no one else was. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're the only ones who were douchey enough to bother him, but he was not having it. He was like, I don't want to be seen in this bar, which wasn't like a college bar. It's like a restaurant. It's like fine that he was in there having a beer, happy hour or whatever. This is before his all his drinking issues came to light. But from then on, I was just like, okay, well, that wasn't very cool. You could have just like gave a wave.
Yeah.
We didn't come over and talk to you,
I'll be honest, I'm mostly excited about the fact that you just told the story of the only drink that Steve Sarkisian has ever turned down in his life came from
I think that's accurate.
I mean, obviously, shout out to Stark for getting his life together. We're not trying to make like super serious jokes, but it's funny. It's funny.
Dude, so the day USC gave him a huge contract to take him from UW, we were pumped. The whole UW community was like, we were gonna fire him within a year, and they like signed. It was like usually your coach gets signed away. You're like, are hired away. You're like, our program's a stepping stone. This and that. We were like, what is USC doing?
Oh man, the comments are always very good. So what about how we got to this point. We talked obviously a little bit about some of the Washington stuff, but like you went to Washington and then you end up writing I always joke about this with like we had a neighborhood get together for the 4th of July. And like, it's people that, well, we have it's a military community. So there's a lot of like also high rank, like there's like generals and shit that are at like our neighbor, which is like really uncomfortable. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, I just ate a bunch of hot dogs on a fantasy football stream. And he's like, yeah, I'm giving out military commands in the Air Force or whatever. It's a very kind of, we live different lives, needless to say, but like, it's accountants and people that whatever. How did you get from where going to school at Washington to now writing a fantasy football newsletter and talking about fantasy football for a living?
I mean, it's a fairly quick story because I graduated with a finance degree in 2009 and the global financial collapse was in 2008 for anyone who has heard of that. Maybe see The Big Short or something, kind of a big deal, right? So I had in my senior year of getting a finance degree at UW, which is a good business school, supposed to be really great at helping you with job placement and everything. I had a teacher throw away a textbook and tell us it was garbage and that we needed to get a subscription to the Wall Street Journal and it would become a current events class. I had another teacher literally take a call from an AP reporter and put the gal on speaker's phone. And he was like, she's been calling me all week. Didn't want to talk to her because he had written about the mortgage-backed security crisis like 2 years prior. And
really?
No one cared when he wrote about it until the global collapse. And so he was like pissed that reporters then wanted to comment because they had went and researched and found that his name was Alan Hess. That shout out, Professor Alan Hess. Guy was like one of the big names at
that's crazy.
And I found the article. I remember I found the paper, after the class or whatever. He was one of the most tenured professors in the business school at the time. Had literally basically predicted the collapse. He's one of the people that sort of saw it coming, and he put the gal on speakerphone. And he's like, "This is going to be your lesson today." He let her know that the class was there, but it was like the rudest I've ever heard anyone be to anyone. He was cutting her off. He was like, "No, you don't understand," and he was just like berating her for like 90 minutes, and that was our class for the day. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life, hearing someone who clearly understood what was happening tell a reporter who was just trying to get quotes and things, and she was like super apologetic and everything, and it was a little bit like rude, definitely. More than a little bit rude. It was a fascinating experience. Sorry if anyone who knows Alan Hess is listening, because I'm not trying to disparage the man too much, but it was a tricky
Margin Call. I just watched Margin Call the other day again but I've watched The Big Short a ton. I have a finance degree as well. It's similar time frame to you. Where you're 1 year older than me. So we went through the exact same thing, and so like that whole era is like just so fascinating.
Yeah. So when I left college, the Career Center. I don't even think I went and talked to the Career Center. I think I heard this from people in class. It was depressing my senior year. It was like, what am I doing? Like my teachers were like, you're all screwed. Like none of what we've taught you matters anymore. The entire financial rules are being rewritten. It's like they were letting us know that. And they're like, you're so screwed because the people that are going to come in behind you, they're going to be younger than you with a finance degree 4 years from now, are going to know more than you by like miles, right? And then the other people that are already in jobs are in better situation. It was I'm playing the world's smallest violin for myself right now, but it was like a really bad time to graduate with a finance degree.
Yes,
like,
it really was.
So the Career Center told somebody, and I heard that like there was like 1/3 of the job listings. I mean, you had literal financial institutions closing their doors. You had Lehman Brothers collapsing. You had, all the. My brother at the time worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they were. He was so pumped because he had just graduated prior to me with a finance degree, that they were not going to lay one off, but they were putting a company-wide hiring freeze on. Like, so all of these good jobs in the finance industry, they weren't there anymore. They were putting hiring freezes, if not laying people off, right? So I went and worked for a credit union for a little while, small business, was just kind of kicking around, not being able to use my degree for much and not really enjoying stuff. And I've always been super passionate about sports. I always, when I was a kid, when people asked me, what are you going to be when you grow up? Back then it was sports agent because of Jerry Maguire. You'd always say, I'm going to be a sports agent.
Good one.
that was the way that you worked in sports. Or people would say, because I love to talk a lot and I was a loud kid, I'd be a sports announcer someday, right? Like those are the things. Because I was super, super into sports. I was still really into it. I enjoyed it. I actually applied to be a PFF game charter and got approved and like did really well in their approval process. But some of the stuff that offseason leading into what was going to be my first year as like a grunt there, like wasn't adding up well for me. Felt like it was a little exploitative, to be completely honest. And so while I was still like planning to do that, I saw some comments from RotoViz. I was starting to read RotoViz. I'd found RotoViz in 2014, reached out to the fantasy douche who used to run it and wrote him this long thing that was like, here's everything I think about fantasy, like egregiously long, like not the way to get anyone to read what you have to write. And he is just like the GOAT at everything. And so he read the whole thing. He came back. He's like, let's do this. Why don't you come up with one topic? And this first piece of advice he gave me, I still think about to this day, which I'm still bad at. Don't try to solve every problem in fantasy in one article. Come up with a very direct and clear topic and write something. And I wrote it that night. I was like, I'm doing this tonight. And I sent it back. It was why CJ Spiller was going to be the new elite receiving back for the New Orleans Saints in the Sean Payton mold. They published it 2 days later. It got a ton of views. It got like over 10,000 views. I couldn't believe it. I was getting paid splits, because they have the system set up there where if you're a new writer, I'm like, I just made a few $100 off an article that what just happened? And so that I dumped the PFF thing because they were like, hey, we'd love to have you write for us more. We really like the way that you put this together. I wrote from the 2015 year. In 2016, they asked me to be an editor in January, just a few months later, to be an editor and be a part of the team that was helping to kind of formulate the content and be content managing at RotoViz. And so then I was there for a couple of years while still working the small business job. But it was just going well and I was enjoying it. There's several times where I was not thinking that I was going to do this long term. And this industry is very competitive in terms of, I think a lot of people think that once you get to certain spots that you're making a lot more money than you actually are in this industry. It's a competitive industry in that regard as well, where because so many people want to do it, not a lot of sites are paying tons and tons of money. And that's just a reality for anyone who's out there that wants to, think about building their life around being a fantasy sports content producer.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I just started growing that stuff, and then eventually, came to RotoGrinders for the year, did Fantasy Insiders for the year that it was a redraft site, which didn't really hit any of our expectations, not what we were all expecting, but I was really proud of the content we put out. I worked with Kitchen really closely. We did some awesome stuff that year. It just, didn't necessarily reach the same audiences. I mean, it was a little bit of a tough thing. We decided to transition away from that. I went to CBS as well then the next off season. And so getting the opportunity obviously to be at CBS was huge and helped launch then me going off on my own. And so, I mean, I joke in my newsletter, people are like, oh, you've built this whole thing on your own. And everyone loves to talk about how they bet on themselves. People like to have those threats. I'm an entrepreneur by happenstance. I did not intend this. I don't think I do the background stuff well. I don't think I'm I know everything. I'm not like Bales, for example, is the fantasy sports entrepreneur who's incredible at everything. All the decisions he makes, everything he touches turns to gold. And I mean that genuinely. Bales is a brilliant dude. I love chatting with him whenever I get a chance to. I'm the opposite of that. Right? But I mean, that's how I wound up here, man.
How has it been going to, kind of a full-time entrepreneur, stealing signals? Obviously you're doing work with RotoViz, you have the ship chasing thing or whatever, but how has that life been? So for background, obviously you and I have worked together, but I left, and I don't know if everyone, I've told this story, but I don't know if everyone in the chat has known. So I worked at Boeing out of high school or out of college, and in the finance area, moved around a little bit. Anyway, end up leaving Boeing to start this startup, which was in the fantasy sports space. That startup did not succeed, but it led me to meeting. I met Cal Spears there. I met Cam McMillan. I met Evan Silva. I met Levitan. I met all those people through that experience. We actually hosted show. We were before like Slack and Discord and all that stuff existed. That's what we were trying to build, was like a community chat tool or whatever. And so like we were doing like the content thing with like Silva and Davis were doing our shows, because we were paying them obviously, but it was like I met all these guys through that. That thing did not succeed, but that led me into a job at Rotogrinders. And it was like that experience has like changed my life. And I operate now in a very similar way. Obviously, I'm still within a corporate construct within Better Collective and everything, but like I've been blessed enough to like I'm kind of like operating a startup from within this big company. And so I like to hear people like you, like how is that like experience for you? How are you, like your day to day? How are you pushing yourself to continue to grow and all that fun stuff?
Well, so yeah, I don't know if I'm the best one to, I can tell you what my day to day is like. It's constantly trying to balance being a dad and a content producer, basically. Like, so I have 2 kids that are growing. Part of the reason, like when I was in that kind of transition period and I wound up doing this, I could have gone back and got a master's in something or a secondary education. Both my siblings did, both my parents did. I'm the only one in my family who didn't. But I had kids kind of young. And so part of it was because I had kids already. I had a daughter already. And she's 11 now. She's incredible, but she's 11 now. Like, she's smart as hell. Like, she wants to hang out with
smarter
dad.
than you.
She's smarter than me. And so I have 2 daughters and my wife, and all 3 of them are smarter than me. And I'm so blessed to have three women to keep me in line. Let's put it that way. But it really is a blast. But I want to carve out as much time for my kids as I can. I don't really see them a lot from like September to December, like as much as I should. Obviously we live in the same house, but like, when I'm writing the Stealing Signals, Dad doesn't really leave his office all day Monday and Tuesday or Sunday, because he's watching all the games in his office. And so it's like a 4-day week, but also I'm doing all the other stuff that I need to do during the 4-day week. It's tough. And so in the off season, at the end of the year, for sure, I'm trying to spend as much time with them while also trying to balance what you said. I want to make sure I'm doing the things that are giving my business enough room to succeed if it can, and trying to have different conversations and think through things and build things out. And did a lot of that this off season. Still spending a lot of time podcasting. I would say one of the things that I enjoy the most is, certainly that there's more freedom to kind of pick your projects. I always loved pretty much everyone I ever worked with in this industry has been really fantastic. But, I loved the CBS team. I didn't want to leave there. Those are great dudes over there. But like getting the opportunity now to pod with Sean twice a week, pod with Pat and Pete, do the show with you during the season, people that I really enjoy talking with and working with was just an incredible thing last year and has been this year. And then as far as like writing or all of that or the newsletter, honestly, I don't think I'm doing a good enough job with like growing it or anything. But I do have this built-in benefit that I keep hearing, sort of a positive buzz about from my subscribers, that is like, I only write about the stuff that I want to write about. And they seem to like that when they get something from me, it's something that I wanted to write about. And basically anywhere else, there are some demands in the content industry where it's like, you got to hit on some temples, you got to hit on sleepers or this or that or whatever. And a lot of that I think is a little bit outdated in terms of how we're actually looking at stuff in the industry. Most of my subscribers are going to be at least a little bit plugged in. Obviously, a lot of the sleepers and those types of things are for people that are less plugged in, that are just looking for some answers the day of their draft. So that stuff has to be done because the content numbers support it. Believe me, I've been in the content managing spots at a lot of different sites. You got to do that kind of stuff in the big sites. But when you are off on your own, like I am, there's a lot more freedom to just do it how you think helps people be better at fantasy football. So that's the biggest thing that I would say in terms of actually like running the business though. Like, I don't do a ton. I'm not doing as much as I should. I'm not marketing it well. Substack does a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. A lot of it's automated. It's not like, people like to glamorize that stuff. I'm not going to lie about it. Like I'm pretty hands off with it, honestly, for somebody who's running their own business, at least.
Yeah. It is funny. Obviously running a site, there are 100% the holy grails that you have to hit. But I will also wholeheartedly agree that like, I mean, like why your Substack exists, why Stealing Bananas exists, and why like the Spike Week tools and stuff exist are all for the same reason. It's like we're all setting out to solve a problem that like this is a fucking problem that I have. Like in my personal fantasy football play, my life, this problem exists. I'm gonna solve it, or solve it the best way I think I know how, and hopefully other people like it, right? Like that's what you're writing, something that you're like, this is, I think, something that I'm trying to figure out, that I'm trying to learn. And theoretically, then the other people are also following along because they want to learn the same thing that you're learning. That's the best, in my opinion. It's maybe not the best, like if you and I both want to become billionaires.
Yeah, right.
But it's the best content from a consumption perspective.
So the becoming billionaires thing, some of the people that are doing that and growing these major media things are just wired different than I am, and I've learned to like respect that, and I think that those are skills and props to them. Some of them I don't think are helping the industry. I mean, we joke about like the counselor and stuff like that. Some of those guys that have massive followings that, then when people find out that I do fantasy sports for a living, that's the type of person that sometimes people are associating with that job. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, I'm a little bit different than that. I don't really know how to explain how I'm.
Have you tried eating hot dogs on a stream instead to see if people will take you seriously?
Who did that?
Yeah, that doesn't work. Also,
have you tried that?
Just in case you're curious, yes, we did it. Are you not aware of this?
No.
Are you actually not aware of this?
I'm actually not aware.
So
I've been on vacation the last couple. Was it recent?
That's true. Yeah, for 4th of July, Rob Coakley and myself did a best ball hot dog eating contest draft where we had to eat a hot dog for every pick that we made and see how long we could go. Essentially, I don't know, because we're idiots. And
you had to eat a whole hot dog. Was it 30-second clock? Was it Underdog?
It was Drafters.
Okay.
And which seems like, oh, maybe that's better. Well, it's 20 rounds as opposed to 18. So there's a couple extra.
We did not make it over there.
We did not make it. No, it's just, I don't know why we did this, Ben. I wish I could tell you. I don't have a really good explanation.
How do you eat a hot dog between 30-second clock picks?
Well, I mean, you take a pick, like, so we drafted one team together between the two of us, and Ivan was watching and we would each eat a hot dog. So one team, so you and I are on the clock. Yeah. We got to eat a hot dog before our next pick comes back around, and it was actually really easy for like 4 rounds or so. Sure. And then that shit really starts to settle in your stomach.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever had in my entire life. But to your point, in terms of if you want people to take you seriously, right? We like to make fun of the counselor and everything. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
One of the most miserable experiences I've ever had in my life. I imagine
recorded on YouTube for everyone to see if they would.
Dude, all of that stuff sounds
pacing
so much
around my house.
Have you ever done like 20-cent wing night or whatever? And you're like, oh, I'm gonna eat 50 wings. Like, fuck no, you're not.
I know.
I can put down food. I think I made it to 20.
I said that coming into there. I said, I think I can do 10. I was like, I think I can do 10 because the same thing. So like, I've been an athlete my whole life, like eating way too, like I've just been in like crazy metabolism. Right. I still struggle with like I eat too much.
Right. I do too.
It's like it's a huge problem for me. So I'm like, I'm not gonna eat. I can put down some fucking hot dogs. I'm like, let's do this. I got like there. It's recorded. People can go watch it. We got like 4 in, and I'm like, oh no. Like, oh no.
My body does not agree.
I'm like, I was wrong. This is terrible. Man. I was so wrong. So anyway, we're trying to do some fun creative content, but in terms of people taking you more serious than the counselor, I'm probably not the best person to talk to.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. So yeah, I mean, I think the point I was making with him was just like there are people that are really good at those skills, at marketing, at growing it. I learned pretty early on that the marketing and all that was not my skills. The analysis was stuff that people attach to. So I try to, I mean, essentially when I try to like market it, I come across way too like I'm marketing. The whole thing with marketing is you're trying to come across like you're not marketing. Right?
Conversational. Yeah.
But I mean, all of this stuff is packaged, right? Like even the people that are like, you asked me like how everything's going as an entrepreneur. I could have packaged it up and been like, oh, these are the things I'm working on and this and that. You hear that stuff sometimes. I mean, you hear that stuff from people who are also saying things like it's, it's better to delegate and stuff. And then so they like really like they found people that are doing this stuff for them. You know what I mean? And like, that's a piece of advice I give. I've found people that have helped me in a lot of different ways throughout, working on my own. It's good to have connections and have people that you trust. But anyway, I'm not going to sit here and like lie. Like I learned pretty much early on that I can't be like, I've kind of been this way since I was a kid. Like I can't be like I'm not like a good BSer. I can't like come up with like understandable lies. Like I sound like I'm lying. I almost sound worse. Like it's really, so I'm just going to be pretty honest about it. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm doing. This is whatever. So anyway, with my work, the thing that's carried it that I, think is pretty great is the actual work, is the analysis. And you were talking about like doing the things that you actually care about. Like, I also think that's more sustainable. Right. Like there's times where I'm saying like, how long am I going to write about fantasy football for? How long am I going to do this? But even when I need a little break, I can take a little break. And then when I have stuff that I'm always interested in, football is the thing. Right. And then especially when football season comes around, like it has been something that has kind of driven, my life since I was a kid. I've been a huge fan of it. I used to go to the Husky games every week and watch Marcus Tuiasosopo. I mean, it's a passion of mine. I played, you talked about playing softball. I used to play flag football a ton. I won the Seattle City flag football championship one year. I mean, and I used to sit in those college classes and drop flag football plays. Like that was at that time, that was the most important thing in the world to me, was my flag football team. Right. And so it is a passion of mine. And as long as I'm never like, at least over these last couple of years, not necessarily being forced to write stuff, or not, I shouldn't say forced, but I'm not writing stuff that I kind of like need to because it's a job. It has been a lot easier for me to be like, okay, these are the things that I actually want to write about. This is what I'm really interested in. This is what I think moves the needle, like you were describing. And then, as far as like marketing it or making it as big as it can get or making the most money, yeah, maybe I'm not, but it has been growing, my newsletter, and it's been growing, I think, largely because I have been staying in that lane and been and willing to be like, I'm doing the stuff that I'm good at and that I enjoy, and the readers are relating to that, right? And so it's more sustainable for me. It's more sustainable for the readers. I think I'm giving better advice as a whole, right? I'm not putting in fluff that's probably not moving the needle. Then they have to try to figure out what actually is helpful. I think a pretty high percentage of the stuff that I write is going to be somewhat helpful, or it's me thinking about things that are going to be helpful, but maybe will hopefully inspire someone else to come up with something that they can apply, which is, kind of the approach that I take sometimes. But yeah, that whole thing, like the way that it's set up, and then on the side, I'm doing these shows with people that I enjoy talking to, like you and Pat and Pete and Sean, and that I'm like legitimately friends with. And we hang out for an hour after the show and just chat and shoot the shit like, weekly. I mean, it's a pretty, like, that's the way to do it, in my opinion. This is the best time I've had in the industry over these last couple of years, is just, even if it isn't the best way to get huge, like we said, like the whole marketing and doing the threads on Twitter and all that is what I should be doing. I've had a lot of people tell me I should be taking screenshots of paragraphs from my newsletter and throwing them on Twitter and being like, go subscribe. And I agree, and I still should be doing that. I'm still not doing it because I don't want to. I just want to write when I think something's interesting and then talk to people who have thoughts about it. And, again, I'm trying to get back to like the concept of, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Because there was a period of time for sure in this industry where I was doing stuff that I loved, but it was work. It was work, and it was at times sort of starting to not ruin fantasy football, but make football season tougher for me, for sure. It was a lot of work sometimes. And I'm somebody who, like, I don't like to fail. So I would grind the job aspect of it so hard that it would push me to my brink a little bit. But now there's a little bit more of a balance, a little bit more of the enjoyment is back. And I think people are enjoying that on the other side as well, that are consuming it.
That's exactly how I feel. The last last year, let's call it the last two draft cycles, have been just absolutely incredible. And I think not necessarily as much my time in fantasy sports. I've definitely had times where like there was a stretch a few years ago where I was writing a daily NBA article for Roto Grinders that like it was actually my idea, so I have no one to blame but myself. But like by later in the NBA season, that's a long grind. The entire NBA season where I'm writing this piece that was really, took up my whole day basically to write this one article where I was like, it wasn't fun anymore. It was definitely work. And I also come from after I mentioned like that startup not working. I met, it led me to this job, but there was a time period where it wasn't like it happened the moment I shut my startup down. It was like I had to find another job in between there. And I went to a place that literally was the most miserable experience of my entire life. I dreaded going to work every single day. I dreaded like every minute that I was there. And it wasn't like some people would think I'm privileged. I guess probably it wasn't the world's worst job in the world. I wasn't like, cleaning sewers or whatever, but like I hated my life for like a year or whatever. And so you start to appreciate this, right? Like you said, I remember we did the NFL draft, Thursday night NFL draft show, right? Ship Chasing did an NFL draft show. And like I came on and I did a couple other spots on a couple other shows, and like I came back and I was like, I don't know, this is just fun for me.
Yeah,
like I'm not getting.
This is where I want to hang out the rest of the draft.
I'm like, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna go pour some whiskey. I'm probably gonna get too drunk, and let's talk about the football.
Right.
Like, and we hung out till midnight or whatever.
What were you going to be doing anyway? Watching the draft and wanting to talk about it.
I'm like, I want to talk to people that are like, these are my friends. You know what I mean? It's like, and we hung out afterwards, and I bought a fucking Jameson Williams jersey unknowingly. I didn't, I didn't know because I drank too much. It was like, but that's the whole thing, and that's what I like about what you're doing with Stealing Signals, what you guys are doing with Stealing Business, obviously what you guys are doing with Ship Chasing, what we're trying to do with Spike Week is just like, let's just create a place where everybody, like, this is fucking fun for everybody. Hopefully a bunch of us are going to make money, right? We all can't win $2 million, but like, hopefully a bunch of us are going to make money. But like, the whole point of this is like, we all enjoy this. We wouldn't be doing this. Like you and I wouldn't be talking here on July 13th if we weren't like just passionate about this space. So like, let's make it as fun for everybody as possible, and then turn it into also hopefully a profitable.
But also, I mean, sort of be good at what you do. You know what I mean? Because that's so. I credit Ship Chasing with a lot of this evolution for me. And Pat and Pete are awesome dudes. I started working with them in 2020. For a long time, I think part of the reason I had a hard time in the industry or whatever was that I took my analysis too seriously, right? I took myself too seriously. I wanted it to be so good. I wanted it to be the best. I'm very competitive about it. And it's finding this fun balance that you're talking about, not worrying about like slip ups when you're talking about stuff, not stressing about things that don't actually really matter, and getting a chance to stream with those guys every week, I think was a big part of that, because those guys are so good at just like making it fun, and having a good time. And then I think that has, been a mindset that has developed more for me. And I've, had it more, I think, in my writing and some other stuff, hopefully, where like, why are we doing this other than to have a good time and not to take yourself too seriously? For me, like, I remember actually having some conversations with Pat and Pete. Was like, I mean, without trying to be like, oh yeah, my analysis is amazing, but people have often said my analysis is pretty good, right? But I felt like I didn't communicate it particularly well. And certainly in this balance between like good analysis and entertaining, like you're talking about, because there's some people that are just like, oh, we're going to make this really fun, but the advice they give is terrible. And like, you're just leading everyone into a ditch. Like you're leading, the lambs to slaughter. Like, cool, it's fun, but like everyone who's listening to you for fantasy football advice is going to lose their league. Like, I'm sorry. Right. And so for me, the balance was always way too far on the analytical side. And so one of the big things that I learned with Ship Chasing, and had some conversations with them and has like been a really natural fit, is like, just try to have more fun with it. Your analysis is good enough that even if it's not perfectly sharp and you're not worried about getting it, exact, it's going to carry you. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be good enough just intermingled with, but like just have a good time, you know? And so, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, there's always people that give advice on like how to do well in this industry, this and that. I'm not the person to give that advice. I didn't take, like the right path. I don't think I took the right approach at first in any of that. I think having a good time, finding people that you enjoy doing it with, trying to find ways that the work you're doing is more sustainable. As opposed to just like you feel like you're grinding all the time. Like you were describing that 9-to-5 job, creating content again, just like you were saying in that job, like it's very privileged to be like, oh, creating content and doing fantasy football stuff is hard. It's not. Everyone else that is listening to this is working a harder job, almost certainly. But it can be a grind and it can wear you down. And you do get a lot of feedback from anonymous people and you get, told you're an idiot sometimes. And there's a lot of those elements as well. And so
sometimes,
trying to find ways to make it as sustainable as possible is usually the advice that I try to give people. I think that's the best advice you can.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's why there's been a lot of good, just general like crossover. Why, obviously we totally ruined the entire best ball market last year. So that was part of why there was good crossover between, say, Spike Week and ship chasing with the wide receiver just avalanche that happened afterwards. But it's the same idea. That's what I believe in. That's what you guys believe in. I think that's where the success of this industry is headed, as you mentioned. The ability to have people show up at 5 p.m. Eastern on a Wednesday afternoon and just want to listen to us hang out and shoot the shit is I'm not trying to put anything on a podium or whatever, a podium or a totem pole or whatever the fucking phrase is.
Podium.
But like podium, is that a
yeah, that's what you said.
Is it?
No, that's what you said, and then you made it into
podium. I was podium. I don't know. We're fucking an hour and 20 minutes into this. I'm making up words now. But I'm like the ability to entertain is part of it. And not even just entertain, like, oh, you have to be this comedian or whatever, but just like be a place that people want to hang out, right? That's what ship chasing is, in my opinion. A place that people want to hang out. And I think that is important while also doing the requisite, right? There's an ante to the game that is, we're going to give you good advice. You don't have to agree with everything, but we're going to give you generally good advice. And I think that's where this industry is headed. So that's why I'm very excited. That's why I was excited to talk to you. I've held you for long enough. I've held the pedestal. Thank you guys.
Yeah, but it has not felt like an hour and 20. This has been a blast, man.
Yeah.
I mean, mostly because you let me sit here and talk about myself the whole time. So that's
apparently. Podium is what came to my mind when I was trying to think of pedestal.
Yeah, you said podium, and then you said podium, and then you said totem, and you meant pedestal.
Literally every other word and a not a real word. And eventually got there. Thanks to you, Corbin. Ben, I am gonna do the thing where I'm like, what actually as a writing the newsletter and stuff, what are you going to be doing like leading up to I know what you're going to be doing in season. What are you going to be doing leading up to the season now?
I'm about to start doing the off-season stealing signals posts, which are pretty in-depth, division by division. Or I think I last year did like the AFC and NFC East together. So I did like 4 posts. So when I get going, I like to kind of grind them out. Division by division takeaways. A lot of that is based on the projections that I've done. Anyone who reads the stuff knows that I don't draft off my projections. It's just more of a research process for me. And I really kind of enjoy trying to come to that statistical equation of what this team's going to look like from a play volume perspective and what all the, pass and run numbers are going to be, receiving numbers, targets, everything. It gives me a really good grasp of what I think the range of outcomes is for various situations, right?
Yeah.
Again, talking about uncertainty always, but going through the process of trying to do one projection is like a huge part of my research. And I've just like never stopped doing the projections, even though I don't really care about the end result and I don't update them after I do them. And I always make this clear, like I'll release them, but I'm not going to sit and update them till week 1 and enter them into some competition or anything. I don't care. Like they're not to be accurate, frankly. They're just sort of, what I think is the most likely scenario in some cases. Right. But the actual write-ups will be, pretty thorough and in-depth in terms of what I see about the players and the way the market's viewing those players and where there's a lot of opportunity. That'll be a lot of fun. That's a lot of work. That'll be most of the rest of the month. Definitely we'll have rankings coming. Last year I had sort of a list of posts that were one-off posts that I wanted to do. I have at least 4 or 5 that I know I want to write in the coming weeks and months, but also I'll be doing some draft reviews of my own teams, talking through strategy stuff. Always do some strategy. What I'm worried about this year is because I wrote a ton last year in July and August. Like there's a lot of stuff in the archives at the newsletter. I'm worried about just rewriting everything. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I got to think through how I'm going to do it. There's going to be good stuff though, whether I, repost or update or do something to make sure that, I'm going to try to prepare people for the drafts as much as possible. That's what I care about. One of the biggest things I do care about in this industry is actually helping people win. Like I really enjoy talking to people. I enjoy the people that have hung out and listened to this, the people that subscribe to my newsletter, email me. They know that I almost always email back or respond to their comments, or, I'm definitely appreciative of all that stuff and enjoying of the, the interactions, the feedback, and anyone who wants clarification and things like that. I always like that. I like the helping people aspect of it. So the goal for the next couple of months will be, hit on some of those tentpoles that are big parts of my process. And that's sort of always the goal of the newsletter. Walk people through my process, how I'm approaching drafts in 2022. But at the same time, it's a little bit open-ended in terms of what's going to come to me and what's going to be inspiring and what I want to write about. That's what sort of the whole point of the newsletter is.
Yep. So make sure you go subscribe. It is a must read for everyone in fantasy football. And, Ben has already hit on it, but it's some of the content that I think is, if you're actually really passionate about this whole space, this is the kind of stuff you should be reading, because exactly, literally the last thing that Ben just said is, when something comes up and he's like, this is really important to me, it's probably really important to you as well. And it's really, that also ends up being the most impactful thing. I can tell you about the sleepers or share my rankings or whatever, but it also doesn't have to be planned. And most of the time, the best content isn't planned. And that's what I love about among other things, about what Ben is doing. So bengretch.substack.com. I fucked it up in the intro, added to the list of things I fucked up. But make sure you go and subscribe, and you'll be seeing, you obviously, you guys probably watch Ship Chasing. You'll see Ben on Wednesday nights. You need to go subscribe to Stealing Bananas. The episodes have always been good. They keep getting better. The latest ones you guys have been doing are absolutely incredible. So I recommend that to everyone. And you might, if you play DFS, see a little bit of Ben and myself on Sunday mornings on Roto Grinders, maybe even a little bit before the season starts. But I will be back tomorrow. Again, make sure and go check out everything that Ben is doing. I'll be back tomorrow talking a little bit of DraftKings strategy. Nobody likes to talk about DraftKings in this space because it's of a miserable experience to draft on their app, but there's millions and millions of dollars to be made on there. So we're going to do a little bit of DraftKings talk, and then I guess I might as well. We're doing another. I told Ben about the hot dog eating contest that we had. We're doing another stupid. We're calling them drafts with a twist. Friday we're doing. Have you ever watched Hot Ones, Ben? Have you watched the YouTube show or whatever?
I've seen spoofs of it. Like Maya Rudolph's spoof of it recently came across my timeline, was hilarious. So
we're doing that. Rob and I are going to do some build up some hot wings that we're going to eat. Well, basically every pick we're going to eat a hot wing that is progressively hotter throughout the draft. So we'll see how it goes. That's going to be on Friday. My wife's already mad at me. She's like, you're going to be useless for like a day and a half and she's right. But anyway, that's for Friday. Go subscribe to Ben's stuff, and I will see you guys tomorrow.